She found the flat on a Tuesday, paid 3 months up front in cash, and did not give her real name on the form. The landlord, a heavy man named Jeffrey who smelled of cigarette smoke and old cooking oil, had not asked too many questions. That was the first thing she had learned to look for in a landlord. Questions were a door left open, and open doors let things in. Jeffrey had glanced at the money, counted it twice, and handed her the keys without once looking her in the eye. She had liked him immediately for that. The flat was on the 3rd floor of a building on Clover Street, in a part of the city that nobody visited on purpose. The walls were the color of old milk. The carpet in the bedroom had been cleaned recently but still held, somewhere deep in its fibers, the memory of someone else's life. The kitchen window looked out onto a brick wall. The front window looked down onto a narrow road where a convenience store blinked its open sign on and off all night like a slow pulse. She stood in the middle of the living room with her 2 bags and said nothing. Then she walked to the front door, gripped the deadbolt and turned it. It caught cleanly. She turned it back. Then again. Then a 3rd time. Then a 4th. On the 4th turn she let go of it. She was not someone who counted things by habit. She had not always been the kind of person who tested a lock 4 times before she felt her shoulders drop. There had been a version of her, years ago, who had moved through rooms without measuring them first, who had opened doors without thinking about what was on the other side, who had slept without one ear always half awake and listening. She remembered that version the way you remember a place you visited once as a child, dimly, with a kind of ache that had no specific target. She unpacked the first bag. Inside, 3 changes of clothes, all plain, all in colors that would not catch the eye. Dark blue, gray, a brown that was nearly black, a small toiletry bag, a phone charger, a torch, a notebook with nothing written in it yet, a small envelope of money that she did not count because she knew exactly how much was in it without counting. She hung the clothes in the wardrobe. She put the toiletry bag in the bathroom. She plugged the charger into the socket nearest the window, the one she could reach without turning on a light. The second bag took longer to unpack. She sat on the edge of the bed with it between her feet and breathed for a moment before opening it. Inside was a small framed photograph, wrapped in a gray t-shirt she no longer wore. She unwrapped it carefully. She did not look at the photo itself. She placed it flat against the wall, face inward, leaning against the skirting board where the wardrobe met the corner of the room. She looked at the back of it for a moment. Then she turned away. She made tea in the kitchen, using a bag she had bought at the train station, and a mug she found in the cupboard above the sink. The mug said something cheerful on it, a slogan about mornings, and she turned it so the slogan faced the wall. She drank the tea standing up, looking at the brick wall outside the kitchen window. The city murmured below, traffic, someone's television, a dog somewhere that could not settle. She had lived in 4 different cities in 2 years, and they all made the same sounds. Different voices, different streets, same murmur. She had come to find it steady, that murmur, white noise of the world going on without her. Her name, on the form she had signed for Jeffrey, was Claire Whitmore. Her real name was Nina. Nina Gallagher, 29 years old, from a small town in the north that she had not returned to in 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. She did not count the days on purpose. The count simply lived inside her the way your own heartbeat does. You are not always aware of it, but it is always there. She finished the tea. She rinsed the mug. She dried it and put it back in the cupboard. Then she went to the front window and looked down at Clover Street. The pavement was empty. A takeaway bag had blown against a lamppost and wrapped itself around the base. A man in a yellow jacket was walking fast with his head down in the direction of the main road. A taxi went past without stopping. The convenience store blinked its open sign. She stood at the window for 4 minutes. She was not thinking about anything specific. She was doing what she did in every new place, in every new window. In the first hour of every new beginning, she was learning the street, memorizing its rhythms, filing away the ordinary, so that one day, if something changed, she would know. She went to bed at 9 o'clock with her clothes still on. She did not sleep until nearly 2 in the morning, but when she finally did, it was without dreaming, and that was good enough. 3 days after moving in, she found a job. It was not difficult to find work when you were willing to take what other people did not want. She was good at that. 2 years of practice had made her very good at it. She could walk into almost any kind of business, hand over a name that was not hers, smile in a way that answered the questions before they were asked, and come out an hour later with a start date. The job was at a dry cleaning shop called Halcyon Cleaners, which was a name far too beautiful for what it was. A narrow shop front on a gray street, smelling of steam and chemical solvents, with a counter that was always slightly damp, and a back room full of other people's clothes hanging in long pale rows like paper dolls. The woman who owned it was named Dot. She was in her 60s, with white hair cut short and small reading glasses that lived permanently on the end of her nose whether she was reading anything or not. Dot had interviewed her for 8 minutes, handed her a green apron, and pointed at the counter. "You'll figure it out," Dot had said. "It's not complicated." It was not complicated. Customers came in. She took their clothes. She wrote them a ticket. She hung their clothes in the back. Customers came back. She found their clothes. They paid. They left. 8 hours a day, 4 days a week. She was good at it. The thing about simple work is that it asks very little of you in terms of yourself. You do not need to talk about where you are from or where you are going. You do not need to explain anything about your life. You need only to be present and functional, and she had become very good at both of those things. On the 5th day, a woman named Carol who worked the afternoon shift asked her where she was from. She had been waiting for this. It always came on about the 5th day. People held their curiosity for as long as felt polite, and then they asked. It was ordinary human behavior. She did not blame anyone for it. "Manchester," she said. She said it the way you say something you have said 100 times, which she had. Carol nodded. "Cold up there," Carol said. "Always," she agreed. And that was the end of it. The city she was actually from was a small town called Branton, which sat between 2 hills in the north of England, and had a high street with 3 pubs, a post office, and a butcher that had been there since before anyone living could remember. She had grown up there, left at 18 for university, come back briefly at 23, and left again at 27, under very different circumstances. She did not think about Branton if she could help it. The Manchester answer was not random. She had spent 3 weeks in Manchester once and knew it well enough to answer follow-up questions if they came. She knew the names of streets, the layout of the tram lines, which neighborhoods were which. She had prepared it the way you prepare a presentation for school, carefully, so that it held up under pressure. Most people did not press. Carol did not press. She had liked Carol after that, and Carol seemed to like her, though neither of them ever used the word friend, and neither of them exchanged phone numbers. And on the days when she worked the morning shift and Carol worked the afternoon, they left each other brief handwritten notes about the state of the counter or any customers who had been difficult, and these notes were the closest thing she had to easy conversation in those first weeks. The flat on Clover Street began to feel like somewhere she lived rather than somewhere she was staying. This happened slowly and then all at once, the way most real things happen. It began with the mug. On a Saturday morning she turned the mug right way round. The slogan faced her while she drank her tea. It said, "Good things take time." She looked at it while she drank, then put it in the sink. And while she was washing it she realized she had not turned it back to face the wall. And she stood with her hands in the warm water for a moment thinking about that. She bought a plant the following week, a small one from the market, green and plain, nothing that required anything complicated from her. She put it on the kitchen windowsill in front of the brick wall. It did not change the brick wall, but it gave her something to look at that was alive and unhurried, and asked nothing of her. She started going to the gym. There was one 10 minutes walk from the flat, on the first floor above a bookmaker's, reached by a narrow staircase that always smelled of rubber and old sweat. It had treadmills, a small weights room, and a changing area with lockers that required a 1-pound coin. She went 4 mornings a week before work. She had not always been someone who exercised, but 2 years of needing to feel ready had made it something she could not stop. When she ran on the treadmill she was not running away from anything specific, not in those moments. She was only running and her mind went quiet, and the only things that existed were the pace and the breath and the number on the display counting upward. She bought a second pair of shoes, a good pair of trainers, plain and gray, that she kept by the door. Not inside the door, right beside it, the kind of place where, if she had to leave in a hurry, she would not have to think. She told herself she was not expecting to have to leave in a hurry. She told herself this often enough that she sometimes believed it. The routines settled in the way that routines do when a person chooses them deliberately rather than falling into them. Hers were not the routines of someone who wanted their life to be predictable. They were the routines of someone who needed to be able to notice when something changed. Morning. She was up at 6. She made tea. She checked her phone. Not for messages, not for social accounts she did not have, but for news. Local news, which she had bookmarked for this city, and for her previous city, and for Branton, though the Branton one she checked only rarely, and always closed quickly. She ran, she showered, she left for work by 7:45, taking the longer route, the one that went around the back of the market, because it had 3 cameras she could see, which meant there might be more she could not. She noticed things on her route without stopping to look at them. The blue van that parked on Merrow Lane every morning, The couple in the ground floor flat of the building on her corner who fought and then made up and then fought again in a cycle she had tracked without intending to. The man who sold newspapers on the junction of the high street, who always had the same thermos and the same expression, and who had begun to nod at her after the first month. She nodded back. These were not friends. They were landmarks. But landmarks matter when you are trying to stay oriented, and she was always, in some part of herself that did not rest, trying to stay oriented. Work. 8 hours at Halcyon Cleaners. She was polite and efficient, and slightly warmer with regulars than with newcomers. Dot had noticed early on that she was good at remembering names, and had made her the person who handled the difficult customers, the ones who argued over tickets or claimed a stain had been there when it had not. She handled these conversations with a calm that was not performance. She had too much practice sitting across from difficult people and keeping her face steady. Evening, she came home. She cooked something simple. She read a book. She did not own a television. She went to bed by 10. Once a week she called her sister. Not from her flat, from a phone box near the market that still worked. Somehow, in the 21st century, like something left over from a different era. She had found it the first week, and had stood looking at it for a long time before she picked up the receiver. She called her sister on Thursdays at 7 in the evening. The calls lasted no more than 10 minutes. They talked about ordinary things, her sister's children, a television program, the weather, which was always something to say something about. They did not talk about why she used a phone box. They did not talk about what she was careful not to say. Her sister was named Faye, and Faye had a husband named Colin, and 2 small boys aged 4 and 6, and she lived in the town next to Branton, and she was the only person in the world who knew that Claire Whitmore was really Nina Gallagher. She did not like bringing Faye into her careful life. It felt like leaving a window slightly open in a room you were trying to keep sealed, but Faye was her sister, and the sound of Faye's voice on a Thursday evening was the one thing she would not give up, because she had already given up enough. On a Wednesday evening in the middle of the second month, she was walking home from the gym when she saw someone standing on the opposite side of the road who made her stop walking. He was not looking at her. He was on his phone, turned slightly away, standing under a street lamp. He was tall, with a jacket she recognized, or thought she recognized, the cut of it, the shoulders. She stood still on the pavement for 3 full seconds. Traffic moved between them. Then he turned slightly more and she saw his profile, and he was nobody. He was an ordinary man on his phone wearing a jacket that was not remarkable and had no connection to anything except her own tight and overworked imagination. She walked home. She made tea. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the brick wall and the small plant on the sill, which had put out a new leaf recently and which she had been quietly pleased about. She was fine. She was absolutely fine. She pressed her palm flat to the kitchen counter and felt the coolness of it and breathed once, slowly, the way she had taught herself. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Out for 4 counts. She had not needed therapy to learn this. She had learned it from necessity. From long nights in small rooms when her own breathing was the only thing she could control. She was fine. The new leaf on the plant was a very bright green, almost electric against the older leaves. She noticed this. She focused on it. She stayed with it until her heart rate came down. Then she washed her hands, dried them, and began to cook dinner. Outside, Clover Street murmured. Traffic. Someone's television. The convenience store blinking its open sign. She was good at starting over. She had had practice. The photograph stayed face down against the wall in the corner of the wardrobe. She did not forget it was there. She was not someone who forgot things, especially not things she had chosen not to look at. But she left it alone the way you leave alone a bruise you know is there. You know the pressure of touching it. You know what it will cost you. So you move around it with care and you do not press. The weeks passed. She kept the routines. She kept the plant watered. She kept the money in the envelope and added to it slowly from her wages because the habit of keeping emergency money was so deep in her now that she could not imagine stopping, even on weeks when she felt almost ordinary, almost safe, almost like a person who lived in a flat and went to work and did not keep her trainers by the door. Almost. She tested the deadbolt 4 times before she slept. Every night, without fail, 4 times. The lock that caught cleanly, the small sound of metal settling into place, the particular silence that followed it. It was not fear, exactly. It was something older than fear, something more efficient, a body that had learned what it needed to do to let itself rest, and did it, and did not apologize for doing it. She thought, sometimes, that she would have liked to be the kind of person who found this strange. Who found their own caution excessive? Who could look at the 4 times deadbolt and laugh a little and think, honestly, I am a bit much. But she could not quite get there. So she locked the door. She counted to 4. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and listened to the murmur of Clover Street until sleep arrived, which it always eventually did. She was building something here. She did not know yet what it would look like when it was finished. She was not sure it would ever be finished, exactly. But she was building it the way you build anything when you have very little to work with. Carefully. 1 brick at a time, testing each one before you put the next on top. She had been good at this, even before she had needed to be. She would keep being good at it. That was enough. For now, it was enough. The name she did not say was 4 letters long, and it sat in the back of her throat like a stone she had swallowed and never been able to bring back up. She had not said it out loud in 2 years, 4 months, and 23 days. People said it to her sometimes, without knowing. She would be in the middle of a conversation about something ordinary, dry cleaning tickets or bus routes, or the kind of weather they were having lately, and someone would mention a person with that name, a neighbor, a cousin, someone on television, and she would feel the word land on her like a finger pressed to a nerve. She did not react. She had learned not to react, but her body always knew, even when her face said nothing at all. His name was Owen. She did not call him that in her mind. She did not call him anything in her mind. She referred to him, when she could not avoid thinking about him, which was less often now than it had been a year ago, and less often a year ago than it had been the year before that, as the king. Not because he had been royal or powerful in any public sense. He had been an ordinary man in most of the ways that the world could see. A business in his own name, a house in a good area, pleasant enough in the way that people are pleasant when they want something from you, and then less pleasant in all the ways that matter when they already have it. She had started calling him the king in her own head somewhere in the 2nd year of knowing him, when she had understood that this was how he thought of himself. Not out loud. He had never used the word. But it was in the way he moved through rooms, the way he assessed people upon meeting them, the way he divided the world very cleanly into those who were useful to him and those who were not. Kings did not explain themselves. Kings did not apologize. Kings expected the world to arrange itself according to their preferences, and they were made very uncomfortable when it did not. She had been useful to him for a long time, and then she had stopped being useful to him in the way he preferred, which was to say she had started wanting things for herself, and that was the beginning of the end, and also the beginning of everything that came after. She did not think about this on most days. She had built her days carefully enough that they did not leave much room for it, but on some days it pushed through anyway, the way cold comes through a wall when the weather shifts, through gaps you did not know were there. This particular day it came through because of a customer named Owen. He had come in at 10:20 on a Tuesday, a small man in his 40s with a blue coat and a harried expression, collecting 2 suits that had been cleaned the week before. He had given his surname on the ticket. He had given his first name when she had asked, because the system required a first name, and his first name was Owen, and she had written it down on the ticket and found the suits and smiled at him, and processed his payment and said goodbye, with a warmth she did not feel in the moment but that she produced reliably, the way a good machine produces things reliably, and he had gone. After he left, she stood at the counter and looked at the ticket in her hand with his name on it for a moment. Then she put it in the completed folder and went to the back room and stood among the hanging clothes and breathed. In for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. Dot came around the corner of the rack with a clipboard. You all right? Dot said. Fine, she said, just needed a second. Dot looked at her over the reading glasses. Dot had a way of looking at people that suggested she knew more than she was saying. But Dot also had a policy, which she had made clear in the first week, of not asking about things that were not her direct business. This was the second reason she had liked Dot immediately. Kettle's just boiled, Dot said, and went back around the rack. She made tea. She drank it at the counter. A customer came in and she smiled and wrote a ticket, and the moment passed, the way moments do. The lie about Manchester had been in use for so long that it had its own texture now, its own weight and detail. She had worn it enough times that it fitted her like a coat she had owned for years rather than one she had bought for a specific purpose. She had a Manchester accent she could produce when she needed to. Not a strong one, a light one, the kind that suggests a person grew up there but spent time elsewhere. This was more believable than a heavy accent, which could be checked and found inconsistent. A light accent invited no particular scrutiny. It said, I am from the north, roughly, and I have moved around a bit, which was true enough. She had layers to the Manchester story, the area she had grown up in, the school she would have attended, a pub she had actually visited once, on a work trip, which she used as a detail because real details are more solid than invented ones. The name of a street near the university. The particular smell of the Arndale market on a Saturday, which she had observed carefully during her 3 weeks there, and which she could describe with enough texture to make a Mancunian nod. She had never had to go deep into it with anyone at Halcyon Cleaners. Carol had not pressed. Dot had not asked. A man named Patrick, who came in to fix the steamer in the 3rd month, had asked if she was from the north, and she had said Manchester, and he had said, "Ah, right," and then they had talked about the steamer, which was what they had actually been there to talk about. That was usually how it went. But she never stopped preparing. She kept the details sharp. She ran through them sometimes in quiet moments, the way an actor runs through lines they know perfectly but cannot afford to let go stale. The street, the school, the smell of the market. Her accent, lightly applied, like something she had almost grown out of. The preparing was not paranoia, or if it was the functional kind. The kind that had kept her safe for 2 years and 4 months and 23 days, and she was not going to stop just because things felt steady at the moment. Things had felt steady before. She saw the photograph in the corner of the wardrobe every morning when she took out her clothes for the day. She did not turn it around. The back of the frame was dark wood, and between the frame and the wall there was a small gap through which she could see nothing. She was aware of this gap in the same background way that you are aware of a sound that has been there so long it is almost silence. It simply was. It sat at the bottom of her wardrobe between the wall and the dark wood of the frame, and it said nothing, and asked nothing, and she moved around it every morning like water around a stone. There were 3 people in the photograph. She knew this without looking at it. She could see it in full detail behind her eyes if she chose to, the way you can read the words of a book you have read many times without the book being open in front of you. She did not choose to look at it in this way very often, but she knew it was available to her when she needed it, when she was having a particular kind of night and needed something real to hold on to. She did not know exactly why she kept it. She had asked herself this question on and off for 2 years. The practical answer was that it was the only photograph she had. She had left in a hurry, and there had been no time for sentiment, and no room in 2 bags for anything that was not necessary, and the photograph was the one thing she had taken that was not necessary in any practical sense, which perhaps answered the question. Or perhaps she kept it because letting go of everything is a kind of death, and she had not wanted to die that way. She had left. She had survived leaving. She was not required to also disappear entirely. It was something she thought about. Sometimes. Not on most days, but sometimes. On a Thursday in the 4th month, she made her weekly call to Faye from the phone box near the market. Faye answered on the 2nd ring, which meant the boys were in bed, and she had been waiting. "Hi," Faye said. "Hi," she said. They talked about the boys first. The older one, Sam, had started reading at school, and was going through books at a rate that his teacher had written home about in an impressed tone. The younger one, Pete, had developed a complicated emotional relationship with a toy digger that Faye described at some length and with great affection. She listened to all of this and laughed in the right places and asked questions and meant them. Then Faye said, "Colin's mum came over at the weekend." "How is she?" "Fine. Good, actually. She asked about you." She felt something shift very slightly in her chest. "What did you say?" "I said you were well, that you'd moved for work." A pause. "She means well. And she doesn't know anything." "I know she means well." Another pause. "Have you heard anything?" she asked. She always said it like this. Not his name, not the king, just anything, which they both understood to mean everything. There was a pause on Faye's end that lasted a beat too long. "Faye." "Nothing definite," Faye said. "Colin mentioned that someone came into the shop, a man he didn't know. Asked if Colin knew a Nina Gallagher." She did not say anything. She stood in the phone box and looked at the scratched Perspex panel and the card that someone had stuck to it advertising a taxi company, and she said nothing. "Colin said he'd never heard the name," Faye said. "Which is true, technically, because he calls you Claire when you come up." "What did the man look like?" "Colin said he was ordinary, medium height, not young." Colin wasn't sure. He said the man seemed polite. Polite. She pressed her back against the inside of the phone box and stared at the taxi company card, and thought about the specific kind of polite that the king preferred his people to use. The kind that kept doors open. The kind that didn't alarm people enough to make them remember details clearly. When was this? About 3 weeks ago. I didn't want to say on the call before this one. Faye's voice was careful and steady, the voice of a woman who had been practicing steadiness on her behalf for 2 years. I thought maybe nothing would come of it. Okay, she said. Nina. Okay, she said again, more firmly, not unkindly, just firmly, because she needed Faye to stop talking for a moment so she could think. Are you all right? Faye asked. Yes, she said. This was a lie, and Faye knew it, and they both understood that it was the kind of lie you tell not to deceive someone but to hold yourself together while they are watching. Are you safe where you are? Faye asked. Yes, she said. This one was not a lie. She was safe where she was. Nobody knew she was here. The man Colin had spoken to did not know she was in this city, on this street, in this phone box. There was no way to know that. She had been careful. She had been so careful. Okay, Faye said quietly. Okay, Faye said quietly. They talked for another 2 minutes about nothing, about Sam's reading and Pete's digger and Colin's mum who meant well, and she stood in the phone box and kept her voice level and warm, and at the end of the call she said goodbye in her normal way and put down the receiver. Then she stood in the phone box and looked at the taxi company card and did not move for a full minute. She walked home a different way than usual. Not the longer route, the one with the cameras. A different route altogether, one she had identified in the first week as a backup, a narrow set of streets that wound behind the market and came out near the supermarket on the far side of the high street. She had not walked it in 2 months. She walked it now, steadily, not quickly, at the pace of someone who knew where they were going. She stopped at the supermarket. She bought milk and bread and a bar of dark chocolate because it was the only thing she wanted, and she was not going to refuse herself it tonight. She went home. She unlocked the door. She tested the deadbolt. 4 times. She stood in the kitchen and ate 2 squares of the chocolate while the kettle boiled, and she thought about what Faye had told her. 3 weeks ago, someone asking after Nina Gallagher by name. Colin's shop, which was not far from Branton, which was where you would start if you were starting from the last known address. That was 3 weeks ago. In 3 weeks, a methodical person could ask around a good deal, could visit a few more places, could eliminate a number of possibilities. She was not registered anywhere under her real name. She had no social accounts. She paid for everything in cash where she could, and had done since the beginning. Her phone was a pay-as-you-go with no contract and no name attached to it. Her rent was paid in cash to Jeffrey, who was not the type to invite inquiries from strangers. None of this was impenetrable. She had never believed it was impenetrable. She had only believed it was careful enough to give her time. She needed to stay careful. She drank her tea. She looked at the plant on the windowsill and the new leaf, which had uncurled fully now and was a good firm green, not the electric green of new things anymore, but settled, real, the color of something that had decided to stay. She ate another square of chocolate. She was fine. She was going to stay fine. She went to the front window and looked down at Clover Street, the ordinary Tuesday night of it, the takeaway places beginning to close, a couple walking arm in arm toward the main road, the convenience store blinking its open sign on and off, like a slow and very patient heartbeat. She stood there for a while. Then she pulled the curtain across, went to bed, and tested the lock from memory without getting up again. 4 times. Each time the same clean catch, the same small sound of metal holding. She was good at starting over. She was, if she was honest with herself, getting tired of it. But tired was not the same as done, and she was not done yet. She pulled the duvet up and lay in the dark and listened to Clover Street, and after a long time, sleep arrived. She let it. Tuesday, she had decided, was her favorite day. Nothing ever happened on Tuesdays. It was the plainest day of the week, the day with nothing attached to it, no expectations, no social weight, nothing due. It sat in the middle of the week the way a plain white plate sits on a table. Useful, reliable, asking nothing of you. She had come to love it with a specific and private devotion. Her Tuesday routine was the most settled of all her routines, and her routines were already very settled. She was up at 6. Tea. Phone. Gym at 7. The route to the gym took her past the man with the thermos on the newsstand, past the blue van that was always parked on Merrow Lane, past the ground floor flat where the couple had been getting on better recently, and whose lights were usually off by the time she passed. She noticed all of these things without appearing to notice them. This was a skill she had developed the way people develop all skills when they need them badly enough, through repetition and attention, until the skill became a reflex and the reflex became invisible. She had noticed things her whole life, actually. Her mother had said, when she was a child, that she had quiet eyes. Her mother had meant it as a compliment, though there was something slightly unsettling in the phrase, as if her eyes were watching things that other eyes missed. Her father had said she was watchful, which was not exactly the same thing but was adjacent to it. Both of them had been right, and both of them had wondered slightly what it meant about a child, to be so observant. Now she knew what it meant. It was what had kept her alive, or close enough to alive that the difference was academic. The gym had 4 treadmills, and she used the second one from the left because it faced the door. She had chosen this without making a formal decision. Her body had simply carried her to it on the first day, and carried her back to it on every day since. She ran for 40 minutes, hard enough to bring her heart rate up to the place where thinking became difficult, and the mind simplified itself. This was what she was there for, the simplification. The way 40 minutes of hard work stripped everything back to the only things that were happening right now. The pace, the breath, the number on the display, the door she could see from this position. Afterward, she did stretches near the wall, and a man named Gary, who was always at the gym at the same time on Tuesdays and Thursdays, raised a hand at her from across the room in his usual greeting, which was the extent of their interaction and which she appreciated for its economy. She showered in the changing room that had the locker requiring a 1-pound coin. She had a system for this. The coin went in her left trainer the night before, so it was ready without having to think about it in the morning. Small systems. All the small systems stacked on top of each other, and together they made something that held. She walked back along her route, and the man with the thermos nodded. She nodded back. The couple's flat was dark, and she noted this without pausing. Work, 8 hours at Halcyon Cleaners. On this particular Tuesday, there were no customers named Owen and no difficult interactions and nothing to stand in the back room and breathe through. There was a collection of 23 shirts belonging to a man called Douglas, who apparently got through a great number of shirts every week. And there was a woman who came in at noon to claim a coat she said she had dropped off a month ago but whose ticket they could not find because she had lost it. And there was the usual steady stream of ordinary people with their ordinary clothes and their ordinary brief conversations. Carol worked the morning with her. They were quiet together, in the way of people who have reached the comfortable stage of familiarity, where silence does not need to be filled. Carol brought biscuits on Tuesdays, a habit that had begun in the 2nd month, and that she found, without meaning to, that she looked forward to. This Tuesday the biscuits were chocolate digestives, and they ate them during the quiet patch at about 10:30, and Carol told her about a documentary she had watched the night before about penguins. She listened. She asked questions. She meant them. She was not performing interest in Carol or in the penguins. Real interest was easier than performed interest, and she had learned this early. People who are fleeing something often perform their entire personalities, afraid that the real one might give something away. She had done this, in the early days. She had performed cheerfulness, and performed engagement, and performed ordinariness. But the performance had been exhausting, and it had not worked very well, because people who are being performed at can feel the gap between the surface and what is behind it, even if they cannot name what they are feeling. So she had stopped performing. She had sat down with herself, somewhere in the middle of the first year, and asked what she actually liked, what she was actually interested in, what she found funny without forcing it, and she had found that she liked books about history. She found that she was genuinely interested in birds. She found that she had a dry sense of humor that worked well with people like Carol, who were also dry and who appreciated a wry comment more than a loud one. She was not pretending to be interested in Carol's penguin documentary. She genuinely wanted to know what penguins did. This was, she thought sometimes, one of the better things she had done, finding her way back to actually being herself, rather than only performing the version of herself that she thought was safe. The two things were not as different as she had feared. Her real self was quiet and watchful and careful. Her performed self had also been quiet and watchful and careful. The difference was that the real one was easier to maintain, and it did not cost her anything. So, Tuesday evening was her best evening. She finished work at 4. She stopped at the market on the way home and bought the things she needed for the week, choosing carefully and without rush in the way she had come to enjoy. A slow inspection of fruit, a conversation with the bread man whose name she did not know but who always offered the last of the sourdough at a discount after 3 o'clock. She cooked properly on Tuesday evenings, not the simple quick things she ate on other nights when she was tired. On Tuesday she cooked something that took time, a proper stew, a baked thing with roasted vegetables, something that made the flat smell like somewhere lived in, somewhere warm. This Tuesday she made a chicken dish she had been thinking about since Sunday, with garlic and tomatoes and herbs she had bought fresh from the market and which were sitting on the counter in a small paper bag. She cooked it slowly. She listened to the radio, a current affairs program, then music, then the evening news, which she listened to with one ear while she stirred. She ate at the table by the front window, which she had started doing in the 3rd month. In the beginning she had eaten standing at the kitchen counter, or sitting on the bed, still inhabiting the flat like a visitor rather than someone who lived there. Eating at the table was the kind of small act of permanence that still felt slightly daring on some days. A declaration, almost. I am eating at a table like a person who lives here, because I do live here, and I am allowed. She looked out at Clover Street while she ate, the evening beginning to settle in. The convenience store had its light on. A woman in a red coat walked past with a child of about 3 who was refusing to walk fast enough and who was being negotiated with at length. She watched the negotiation with interest and slight amusement. The child held firm. The woman in the red coat eventually picked the child up, and the child immediately became cheerful. Problem solved. She washed up. She made a cup of tea. She sat with her book, which was a history of the English Civil War that she had taken out of the library in the second month, and renewed twice, because she kept finding other books that she needed to read at the same time, and going back to it in between. She was at a point in the history where things were about to go badly wrong for a king, and she read with a particular feeling she could not quite name, a mix of grimness and something warmer, something that was not quite satisfaction but was in the neighborhood of it. She read until 9. She brushed her teeth. She changed. She went to the corner of the wardrobe, where the photograph sat face down against the wall, and she looked at the back of it for a moment, the dark wood of the frame, the small gap between the frame and the plaster, and she thought about the 3 people inside it, and she did not flip it around. She turned off the light. She lay in the dark. The city murmured. Traffic, someone's television, the dog somewhere that could not settle, though she had not heard that dog in a few weeks actually, and hoped it was all right. She thought, as she often did in the 10 or 15 minutes between lying down and sleeping, about what she was building here. Clover Street, Jeffrey and the deadbolt, Dot and Carol, Gary at the gym with his economical raised hand, the man with the thermos, the plant on the windowsill, which had now put out 2 new leaves and was beginning to look established. She thought about Faye's call, the man in Colin's shop, 3 weeks ago, which was now 4 weeks ago. She did not let herself run forward into the fear. She had learned to keep that on a very short leash, to pull it back before it got momentum. What she knew was this: she was here, and nobody knew she was here, and she had been careful, and being careful worked. Being careful had given her 2 years and 4 months of an ordinary life that was building slowly into something she could almost call her own. She was not going anywhere. She tested the deadbolt in her mind. 4 clicks, 4 solid catches. She was not going anywhere. She slept. The gym bag by the door had the change of clothes in it. She had checked it that morning, as she checked it every morning, not because she thought she would need it, not because she was planning anything, but because the checking was part of the routine, and the routine was the thing that kept the fear in its proper place, which was small and managed and useful, rather than large and wild and in charge. 3 days' worth of clothes, a small amount of cash in the inner zip pocket, her second phone, a spare she had bought 6 months into her time in this city, which had a single number programmed into it, and which she kept charged but did not use. She had a plan for leaving. She had always had a plan for leaving. Every city had a plan for leaving. The first city, she had made the plan within a week, and then spent 6 months hoping she would not need it, and then needed it very suddenly, and was glad she had made it, because when the moment came there was no time for thinking. There was only time for doing what had already been decided. She was not expecting to need the plan for leaving Clover Street. She had said this to herself before, about other streets, in other cities. She had been right twice. She had been wrong once. But she had been wrong with a plan, which made the difference. She kept the bag. She checked the bag. She kept the plan. And on Tuesdays, which were her favorite days, she cooked something good, and ate at the table, and read about kings who had lost their grip on things, and she felt something that was not quite contentment but was sitting very close to it. The plant put out another leaf in the 3rd week of the 5th month. She noticed it on her way out of the kitchen. She stopped and looked at it for a moment. 3 leaves now, all solid, all the settled green of something that had decided to stay. "Good," she said quietly, to nobody. Then she picked up her bag and went to work. The man with the thermos nodded at the junction. She nodded back. Tuesday moved at its usual pace, which was slow and wide and asked nothing of her that she was not already glad to give. She was, on balance, building something worth keeping. She held on to that and kept walking. The phone rang on a Thursday at 6:47 in the evening, which was 13 minutes before she was due to leave for the phone box near the market, and the number that came up on the screen was her sister's. Faye never called. They had an arrangement. She called Faye. From the phone box. At 7. That was the arrangement, and Faye understood the arrangement and the reason for it, and Faye did not break the arrangement. She looked at the phone for 2 rings. Then she answered it. "Something's happened," Faye said. Her voice was even. Faye's voice was always even. It was one of the things she relied on about Faye. That steadiness. The quality of a person who had decided a long time ago to be the calm one in difficult situations, and who had kept that decision long past the point where it was easy. She sat down on the edge of the bed. "Tell me," she said. "He came to the house," Faye said. The kitchen, the plant, the brick wall, the ordinary sounds of Clover Street outside, all of it receded to a kind of background noise, very far away, while Faye's words sat in the front of her mind, and very slowly arranged themselves into meaning. "He came to your house," she repeated. Her voice was level. She noted this about herself without pride or surprise. It was simply what her voice did under certain conditions now. It leveled out. It went quiet and measured, because this was what was needed. "Not him," Faye said quickly. "Not him personally. 2 men. I don't know them. They knocked on the front door at about 4 in the afternoon. Colin was home. He answered it. They asked for me by name." She said nothing. She waited. "They said they were friends of a man who was trying to reconnect with an old friend of his, a woman named Nina Gallagher, and they thought I might be able to help. Colin said he knew a Claire, not a Nina, and that he wasn't sure what they were talking about." "Did they believe him?" "I don't know. Colin says they were very polite. He says they thanked him and left without pressing it, but he watched from the upstairs window and they sat in their car outside for about 20 minutes before driving away." 20 minutes. She looked at the wall of the bedroom, at the wardrobe in the corner, at the small dark edge of the photograph's frame visible at the very bottom of the gap between the wardrobe and the wall. "Are the boys okay?" she said. "The boys weren't home. They were at Mum's." A pause. "Nina." "Yes. He knows you have a sister. He's going to keep coming back until he knows more." She was aware of this. She had been aware of it for 2 years. The specific mathematics of her situation, she could remove herself from public records and social accounts and mailing lists. She could use cash and change names. But she could not remove the fact that she had a sister, and the sister had a house, and the house was in a place that the king knew about because he had visited it once, 2 years ago, before she had known what he was or what she was going to have to do. "Is Colin frightened?" she asked. "Colin is angry," Faye said with a note in her voice that was almost fond. "He's been pacing for 2 hours. He wants to call the police." "He should not call the police," she said, because this was still the truth, still the thing she believed for the same reasons she had believed it 2 years ago, the particular reasons that were hers and that she had examined from every angle and arrived back at the same conclusion each time. Not yet, not this way, not without something more solid than 2 polite men sitting in a car. Faye was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. "Tell Colin I know he wants to help. Tell him the best thing he can do is nothing. He won't like that." "I know." Another pause. "Have you got what you need?" Faye asked. This was their code, the shorthand they had developed for the question that could not be asked plainly. "Have you got what you need" meant, do you have money, a plan, somewhere to go if you need to go there, the things in the bag by the door? "Yes," she said. "Okay," Faye said. And then, more quietly, "I'm sorry, Nina." "Don't be sorry," she said. "You've done nothing wrong." This was true. Faye had been nothing but steady and careful and loyal, and the guilt she carried for involving Faye was not Faye's doing, and it was not something she could resolve in a phone call, so she put it in the place where she kept things that were true and painful and not currently actionable, and she left it there. "I'll call next Thursday," she said. "Same time. If anything changes before then, text me." She gave a specific word, a single ordinary word that they had agreed would mean "call me now." Not the word itself, but the context, sent in a message that looked like nothing to anyone who did not know. "All right," Faye said. She hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment without moving. The bedroom was dim. She had not turned the lights on when she came in from work, had simply put her bag down and sat on the bed to read, while the last of the daylight came through the curtain, and now it had gone and she was sitting in the near dark. She reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. She spent the next hour making a list. Not on paper, she never wrote things down, but in her mind, which was the kind of mind that could hold a great deal of organized information without needing to see it physically arranged. The list was of things she knew and things she did not know. Things she knew, the king had been looking for her for some time, probably longer than the 4 weeks since the visit to Colin's shop. He had people helping him. At least 2 people, the man who visited Colin and the men who came to Faye's house, which meant the operation was considered worth staffing. He was moving from the outer circle inward, which was how you looked for someone when you did not have their direct location. Faye and Colin were the closest connection he knew about. He did not know she was here. She was very certain of this. If he had known where she was, he would not have been visiting Faye. He would have simply come. That was how he worked. He sent people to places where he thought things might be known. He would not send people to Faye's house if he already had the address she was sleeping at. It would serve no purpose. He was efficient in that way. She would give him that. Things she did not know. How patient he was willing to be. How long he would maintain this level of looking before something changed in his approach. Whether anyone else she had been connected to had been visited. She thought about the second question for a long time. How long? She had known him for 3 years. She had been with him for 2 of them and running from him for another 2. In the time she had known him, she had learned a great deal about how he thought. The way you learn about the terrain of a country when you live there long enough, even the parts you never intended to know. He was patient when patience served his interests. He was also capable of moving very fast when he decided that patience had expired. She had seen both of these modes. She knew the signs of the shift from one to the other, or she thought she did. Sending people to Faye's house was a shift. It was not the same level of effort as asking around a shop. Faye's house was a deliberate escalation. She did not panic about this. She noticed it and filed it and held it with the same steady attention she had given everything else. She went to the kitchen and made tea. The plant had 4 leaves now. She stood looking at it while the kettle boiled, the 4 leaves in their different stages of green, the oldest ones darker and more settled, the newest ones the light bright color of things just beginning. She thought about what she was not going to do. She was not going to leave. She had run twice in 2 years, and each time she had left before it became necessary, tipped into motion by fear rather than by the actual facts of the situation. The first time it had genuinely been necessary, she had been right to go. The second time she had gone earlier than she needed to and had spent 6 months in a city she did not like as a result. She was not going to do that again without a clearer reason. She was safe here. She had built something here. The plant had 4 leaves. She had her routines and her gym and Carol's biscuits on Tuesdays and the man with the thermos who nodded, and the library book about civil wars and the tea and the cheerful mug, and the table by the window where she ate like a person who lived somewhere. She was going to stay unless she had a specific reason not to. This was a decision she made standing at the kitchen counter looking at the plant. She drank her tea. She went back to her book. She slept badly that night, and she knew why, and she did not pretend otherwise to herself. Because she was past the stage of pretending things were fine, when they were not quite fine. Things were not quite fine. The king was looking for her with more intent than he had shown before, and this was a fact, and facts deserved acknowledgement. She acknowledged it, and then she set it aside and tried to sleep. She managed a few hours before 4 in the morning when she woke and lay in the dark and thought clearly about the things that were true. She was here. She was unknown here. She was careful. She had a plan. Faye was steady. Colin was angry, which was less useful, but Colin was also fundamentally a good man who loved Faye, and a good man who loves someone will eventually understand how to be helpful even if it does not look like action. She thought about the 2 men in the car outside Faye's house. 20 minutes. She tried to imagine what they had been doing during those 20 minutes, reporting back, receiving instructions, waiting to see if anyone came or went from the house, waiting to see if anyone arrived who matched a description they had been given. She thought about what description they had been given. She had changed her hair twice in 2 years. She had lost weight and then put some of it back. She wore no jewelry now, where she had worn some before. She dressed differently, plainer, the colors she had chosen for their usefulness rather than for any preference of her own. The person they were looking for looked somewhat like her, but not exactly. This was not a guarantee of anything, but it was something. She shifted in the bed. She looked at the ceiling. Outside, Clover Street was quiet, the deepest part of the night, the part that belongs only to people who cannot sleep, and to the city's slow, necessary operations. She thought about Faye saying, "I'm sorry." She thought about the way you could love someone so much that being loved by them cost you things, and the way the person doing the costing was supposed to feel about that. She had not resolved this. She was not sure it was resolvable. She was simply carrying it, the weight of what her situation had asked of Faye, the way Faye carried it without complaint and without making her feel the weight of it, which was itself an act of love so steady and so large that she did not have adequate words for it. She would not call it debt. That was wrong. It was not debt. It was something closer to the kind of love that does not need to be balanced, that simply is, that flows in one direction for a while without complaint because the other person cannot flow back right now, and this is understood and accepted without making the love smaller. Faye was the only person she trusted completely. That was a short list. One name. and it was enough. She turned onto her side. She closed her eyes. She thought, I am going to stay. I am not going to panic. I am going to keep being careful, and the routines are going to hold, and the flat is going to stay locked at night, and the plant is going to keep growing. She did not entirely believe this, but she said it to herself anyway, because it was the thing that needed to be true, and sometimes the gap between what needs to be true and what is true can be closed by repeating the right things in the dark until the morning comes. The morning came. She got up, she made tea, she went to the gym, she ran on the second treadmill from the left, facing the door, and her heart rate came up to the place where thinking became difficult, and for 40 minutes the only things that existed were the pace and the breath. She went to work. She smiled at Carol. She ate a chocolate biscuit. She wrote tickets and found clothes and processed payments. At the end of the day, she walked home the longer route, past the cameras. She cooked. She ate at the table. She tested the deadbolt. 4 times. She was still here. For now, that was the only thing that needed to be true. There had been a wardrobe in the other house. A large one, dark wood, with brass handles that she had polished once because she was the kind of person who noticed when things needed polishing, and then did them. She had not taken a single thing from that wardrobe when she left. She had gone through it in her mind many times since, not because she missed the things in it, not because she wished she had taken them, but because the contents of a wardrobe are a kind of autobiography, and that autobiography was a version of herself she had not yet finished examining. A woman's wardrobe tells you what she hoped for when she got dressed in the morning. It tells you what she thought of herself, and what she wished other people would think of her. The clothes she had left behind told a story she could read clearly now, with the distance of 2 years, that she had not been able to read while she was living it. There had been dresses in colors she had not chosen herself, not dramatic ones. The king's preferences were never dramatic. He did not shout, and he did not demand in language. He simply made it clear, in the way that very calm and certain people make things clear without raising their voice, what he found attractive, and what he found interesting, and what he preferred to see. And over time those preferences had arranged themselves inside her wardrobe like a second person living there. She had not noticed this happening. That was the particular quality of gradual things. They arrive so slowly that by the time you can see them, you are already surrounded by them. She had noticed a dress she liked in a shop window once, early in the 2nd year. It had been green, a dark sage green, the kind of green she had always liked, the kind of color that was the color of something real, rather than something decorative. She had stood looking at it for a moment. He had said, very pleasantly, that he didn't think it was quite her color. She had thought, he's probably right, and she had moved on. Standing in her flat on Clover Street, 5 months into living there, she pulled a dark green jumper from the back of her drawer where she had put it when she arrived. She had bought it 6 months before moving here, in the city before this one, from a market stall, cheaply, in the color that she had always liked and that she had chosen without asking anyone. She had worn it twice. She put it on now and looked in the bathroom mirror. It was her color. It had always been her color. She thought about the dress in the shop window and the very pleasant way he had said that it was not quite right for her, and she felt, in no particular order, a quiet sadness for the woman who had agreed, and a dry contempt for the certainty with which he had offered the opinion, and something harder and cleaner underneath both of these, something that had been growing for 2 years and that she had no single word for but that kept her upright on mornings when upright did not feel easy. She had earned the green jumper. She kept wearing it. She had met him in the ordinary way. This was the part that seemed to surprise people when women described it, as if meeting someone in an ordinary way was supposed to protect you from what followed. She had been at an event connected to her work at the time, a small company in the north that did something with logistics. Her role in it, administrative, necessary, invisible in the way of roles that everything depends on but nobody celebrates. The event was in a conference center, a pale building with too much air conditioning, and he had come in with a group of men she did not know and had stood at the edge of the drinks table and looked at the room in the particular way he had, assessing it. He had looked at her with the same assessment. She had not known then what the assessment meant. She had known only that he was looking at her in a way that suggested she was worth looking at, which was, she could see now, one of the oldest and most efficient methods of beginning something. His name came up first. His reputation, successful, established, well-regarded in certain circles. His appearance, tall, good posture, a face that was not beautiful, but that was extremely confident, and confidence at that level has an attractive quality, regardless of what it is attached to. He had crossed the room to talk to her, not immediately, not clumsily. He had waited a specific amount of time, long enough to suggest that he was choosing his moment rather than acting on impulse, because choosing his moments was something he did with everything. He had been funny, genuinely funny. She remembered being surprised by this, a little taken aback, because she had a dry humor that most people did not quite land with, and he had landed with it immediately, had picked up the register and matched it, had made her laugh with something she had not expected. She understood now that this had been part of the assessment. He had looked at the room and found what it wanted, and what she had wanted, without meaning to give away that she wanted it, was to be understood, to be seen in the specific way of someone who gets your humor without you having to explain it, to feel, for a moment, that she was not making an effort to be comprehensible to another person but simply being understood. He had given her that. He was very good at giving people the specific thing they most wanted. She had spent the better part of a year being given things before she understood what was happening in exchange. The exchange was herself. Not a sudden one. Nothing about him was sudden. The exchange happened in increments so small that each one seemed, on its own, like nothing. A preference expressed. A small habit of hers found slightly inconvenient. An arrangement altered in a way that made more sense for his schedule. A comment about a friend of hers that was not unkind but was particular. The kind of comment that plants a small doubt and then does not water it directly but simply lets the ground stay dry. She had been good at herself before she met him. She had known her own opinions and her own tastes, and the things that made her laugh. She had liked her own company, and been liked in return by the people she chose to spend time with. She had been a person she would have recognized. By the end of the second year, she was not sure she would have recognized herself. This was not dramatic. That was the part that people got wrong about these situations when they imagined them. They imagined something dramatic, raised voices, obvious boundaries crossed, the kind of moment that makes a person look up and say this is wrong. But the drama had not been there. The drama would have been easy to see. What had been there instead was the persistent, quiet pressure of a very certain person against the borders of a less certain one, until the borders moved so gradually that the person inside them did not notice the territory shrinking, until she reached for something that used to be there and found empty space. She had reached for her own opinion on something, one afternoon in the third year, a small thing, a decision about a weekend that she would have made without thinking 2 years earlier. And she had found that her first instinct was not her own preference but a calculation of his, a pre-checking of whether what she wanted would be convenient for him, whether it would fit, whether he would find it reasonable. She had stood in the kitchen of that house, in front of that wardrobe's sister, holding a mug of tea, and she had thought, that is not how I used to think. And then she had thought, when did I stop thinking that way? And she had not been able to answer it, because there was no single moment. It was just time, and pressure, and the slow accumulation of small surrenders that had not felt like surrenders when they were happening. She had thought about this for 3 weeks. She had not said anything. She had learned not to say things she had not fully worked out yet, because half-worked thoughts were harder to hold to in conversation with someone who was very articulate and very practiced at steering. She had used those 3 weeks to think clearly. She had left on a Wednesday. Not dramatically, not in the middle of the night. She had waited until he was away, a work trip, 2 nights, which he had told her about a week before. She had spent that week doing things that looked ordinary. She had not changed her behavior in any way he could have detected, because she had understood by then that he was someone who noticed changes in behavior, who used subtle shifts in people around him the way a navigator uses subtle shifts in wind. She had waited until the morning of the second day of his trip. She had packed 2 bags, not the large suitcase. She had left it in the wardrobe. She had taken only what would fit in 2 bags, the practical things, the things that were genuinely hers, the money she had been slowly, quietly saving, in a place he did not know about, for an amount of time she was not going to think about right now because it would remind her of what she had been preparing for, and for how long she had been preparing for it, while pretending she was not. She had stood in the hallway with the 2 bags and looked at the house one last time. She had gone back for one thing, the photograph. She had not looked at it. She had wrapped it in the gray t-shirt and put it in the second bag and left. She had not left a note. She had not called him. She had not explained. She had understood that explanations were doors, and doors could be argued through, and she was not going to have that argument because she had already had it 100 times in her own head, had run every version of it, had heard all the ways he would respond, the reasonableness of his tone, the particular calm certainty of someone who considered themselves always in the right, and she had nothing to say to any of it that she had not already said in the privacy of her own mind. So she had said nothing. She had simply left. And she had been leaving ever since, in one form or another, putting distance between herself and the sound of his voice, which was the particular distance she was working hardest on, not physical but internal, the slow work of finding her own voice again in the space where his had been. She was getting better at it. The green jumper helped, in a way that was small and specific and entirely her own. She had worn it again on a Tuesday the following week. Carol had said it was a nice color. She had said thank you and meant it. And she had gone back to writing tickets and being Carol's person for the difficult customers, and the morning had passed in its ordinary Tuesday way, and she had eaten a biscuit and listened to facts about penguins, and felt, in a very quiet part of herself, that she was beginning to trust again, like someone who was reclaiming something acre by acre. The dress in the shop window had been sage green. She had wanted it. He had said it was not quite her color. He had been wrong. She knew that now the way she knew the 4x deadbolt and the second treadmill from the left, and the route past the cameras. It was information she had. It was hers. Nobody could take information from you once you had truly learned it. She kept the green jumper at the front of the drawer now, where she could reach it first. She put it on the next Tuesday, and the one after. And the one after that. She was late for work that morning. Not very late, 11 minutes. But 11 minutes meant she was running her route faster than usual, head down against the cold of a morning that had turned overnight from something manageable into something with an edge in it, the kind of edge that gets into your collar and stays there regardless of what you're wearing. She had overslept for the first time since moving to Clover Street. She had not slept badly. She had slept deeply, which was different, and rare enough that she had not recognized it when her alarm went off and had simply turned it off without fully waking, which she had never done before, and had not discovered this mistake until 20 minutes later, when she had come awake all at once with the specific wrongness of a room that is too light for the time you think it is. She had been on her feet before she finished the thought, dressed in under 3 minutes, out of the flat in 4. No gym this morning. No longer route with the cameras. No pause at the newsstand where the man with the thermos would have nodded. Straight down the main road, walking fast, bag over one shoulder. Coffee she had not had time to make a slight hollow absence in her chest. She was thinking about the handover note she would need to leave for Dot about a collection that had been missed the previous week. And she was thinking about whether the market would still have sourdough left if she went after her shift. And she was thinking, distantly and without much focus, about the phone call she had arranged with Faye for next Thursday. And she was not, in these 11 minutes of being late, thinking about anything that required her to be particularly watchful. This was the thing she had let slip, just for 11 minutes, just this once. The station was 3 minutes from the dry cleaner, and she cut through it sometimes as a shortcut, which she was doing now because it saved 90 seconds, and 90 seconds mattered when you were 11 minutes late. The station on a weekday morning was full and moving, a dense, ordinary river of people going in all directions. She moved with it, angling through the main hall toward the far exit that opened onto the street behind Halcyon Cleaners. She was looking at her phone. She never looked at her phone while she was moving through a place. This was the second thing she had let slip in 11 minutes, which was the highest rate of slippage she had allowed herself in 2 years. She saw them before she had fully processed that she was looking at anything at all. She was aware of her eyes landing on the floor near the far concourse, on the flow of feet and legs and bags, and the ordinary geography of a busy station at 8:49 in the morning, and she was aware of her eyes tracking across all of this and snagging, the way a fingernail snags on a thread, on something specific. She stopped walking. Boots. Black. Not new but well maintained, which was a specific kind of maintenance. The maintenance of someone who considered their things worth caring for. A slight square toe, wider than fashion currently preferred, which meant they were older, which meant they had been chosen and kept and continued to be worn rather than replaced. The left heel had a scuff on its outer edge, a specific scuff, a small white mark about 2 centimeters long at the exact same angle on the heel. She could not breathe. She had put that scuff there, 3 years ago. She had been moving something in the hallway of the house, a box, and she had caught her foot on the heel of a shoe that had been left near the door, and the corner of the box had scraped the left heel. She had seen it happen, and had known he would notice, and had felt the preemptive tightening that came with knowing he would notice, and she had thought about telling him immediately, explaining, getting ahead of it, and had decided to say nothing, and wait to see if he mentioned it. He had not mentioned it. She had not forgotten it. There was a scuff on the left heel of a pair of black boots in a train station, 2 centimeters long, angled slightly downward from left to right. She looked at it. She looked at it the way you look at something you are hoping will change, the way you look at a word you have read 3 times and that keeps meaning what it means. The scuff did not change. Her eyes moved very slowly upward. The trousers above the boots were dark gray, well-fitted, pressed. She knew the press. She knew the particular sharp crease of it. She had seen it every day for 2 years. She had collected trousers with that crease from dry cleaners that were not this dry cleaners, in a city that was not this city, in a life that she had walked away from 2 years and 5 months ago, and had not looked back. She did not look up further. She was 5 meters from those boots. She turned. She did not run. Running drew attention, and attention was the only thing worse right now than being still. She turned as if she had remembered something and needed to go back the way she had come, a natural turn, an ordinary redirection, and she moved back through the crowd toward the main entrance of the station. Her heart was doing something she did not have a word for. It was not racing. It was something more contained than that, something compressed, a tremendous amount of pressure in a very small space, like a sound that has been turned all the way up inside a closed room. She was through the main entrance. She was on the street. She turned left, not toward the dry cleaner, not toward home, toward the market, which was in the opposite direction, because she needed to move, and she needed to move somewhere she could think, and she needed to do both of these things without leading anyone anywhere useful. She walked for 2 full minutes before she noticed that she was gripping her phone so hard that the edge of it was leaving a mark across the heel of her palm. She loosened her grip. She put the phone in her pocket. She breathed. In for 4 counts, walking. She counted the steps instead of the seconds. 4 steps, hold, 4 steps, out, 4 steps. She reached the market and went in through the side entrance, into the warm press of the fruit and vegetable stalls, the smell of cut greenery and damp stone. She moved through it toward the middle section where the stalls opened up and there was a coffee stand she had used twice before, and she stopped at it and ordered a coffee, and paid with coins from the pocket of her jacket, without looking at what she was handing over. The woman at the coffee stand gave her change and a cup and looked at her the way service workers look at people who are slightly elsewhere, with a neutral efficiency that asked nothing. She stood with the cup and faced a display of root vegetables and breathed. The boots. The left heel scuff. It was possible she was wrong. It was possible she had looked at a pair of boots in a train station on a weekday morning and had seen what she was most afraid of seeing, had assembled a memory from fragments, had let the fear she carried always do the thing that fear did when you were tired and not watching. This happened. She knew this happened. She had stopped at a stranger in a yellow jacket once and had nearly not kept walking. She had misread things before, but she had not been wrong about the scuff. The scuff was the kind of specific detail that fear did not invent. Fear made things vaguer, turned them into impressions. Fear did not produce a 2-centimeter white mark on a left heel, angled slightly downward from left to right. That was not the product of fear. That was the product of memory. She had made that mark. She knew those boots. She drank half the coffee. Her hands were steady. She observed this, noted it. The hands knew what to do even when everything else was doing what it was currently doing. She needed to think about the facts. The facts. He was in the station. He, or someone wearing his boots, which meant he was here, or the boots were here on another person, which was possible but unlikely given the specific nature of the scuff, was in the station this morning. This morning when she had been 11 minutes late, and had not used the longer route, and had not been paying attention. He had not seen her, she was nearly certain of this. She had been in the crowd, moving with the crowd, anonymous in the crowd. She had not looked up. She had not met his eyes. She had turned before she could be registered, if she had even been in his sight line, which she did not know. She did not know if he had seen her. She finished the coffee. She put the cup in the bin beside the stand. She looked around the market, the ordinary commerce of it, the people with bags and trolleys and the calm absorption of people doing shopping, and she thought about what happened next. She was 4 months and several days into the longest stretch of stability she had built since leaving. The plant had 4 leaves. Dot knew her as Claire. Carol brought biscuits on Tuesdays. She had a library book about civil wars, and a cheerful mug, and a green jumper at the front of her drawer. She thought about all of this the way you think about things you might be about to lose. Then she thought about something else. She thought about the fact that she had turned before looking up. She had seen the boots and the trousers and she had gone. She had not confirmed it. She had not looked at a face, which meant she did not know. She did not know if he had looked up and seen her. She did not know if he had recognized her. She did not know if, in the 2 minutes since she had turned and walked away, he had stood in the same position, or moved, or looked around, or spoken into a phone. Not knowing was the thing she could not work with. What she could work with was the fact that she was not going home. Not yet, not directly. She was going to move through the market and exit on the north side and take a bus to the next part of the city and sit on it for 3 stops and watch to see if anyone got on the same bus, and then she was going to take another bus back to the part of the city near her flat and approach from the west, not from the station side, and she was going to walk past the flat once before she went in, from the opposite pavement, and look at the street. Then she would decide what to do. This was the plan. She had made it in the time it took to finish the coffee. She moved through the market toward the north entrance. She did not run. She did not look back. She moved with the crowd, which was warm around her, full of ordinary purpose, people who did not know what had just happened, and who were simply buying vegetables and bread and small bunches of bright flowers from a stall near the exit. She bought nothing. She went through the north entrance and into the cold morning air. She kept walking. The boots. The left heel. The 2-centimeter scuff she had made with the corner of a box in a hallway in a different life. She was cold without her coffee. She was late for work, later now, late in a way that Dot would notice and that she would have to account for with a story. She walked to the bus stop and waited. She had done this before. She had done harder versions of this. She was still here. She was still here, and she was going to think her way through this, the same way she had thought her way through everything else. Clearly, without rushing, with all of her attention on the facts and none of it on the fear, which was large right now, but was also familiar, was also something she had learned to use, rather than be used by. The bus came. She got on it. She sat near the back, facing forward where she could see the door. She kept breathing. She rode the bus for 3 stops and watched the door. Nobody got on that she recognized. Nobody got on that she did not recognize who also got on looking at other passengers rather than the window. She noted this, and noted that it was not conclusive, and noted that she was going to have to keep moving regardless because the bus was not a destination. She got off at the junction near the library. The library was open. She went inside. Libraries had been a consistent refuge in a way that required no explanation. They were warm. They were quiet. They were full of people who were absorbed in their own business. A person sitting in a library with a book was the most invisible kind of person in any city. She had used libraries in all 3 cities and they had never let her down. She took a book from the nearest shelf without looking at the title. She sat at a table near the window, facing the door, and she opened the book and she thought. She had a plan for leaving. She had always had a plan for leaving. The plan was in the gym bag by the door, in the clothes and the cash and the spare phone. The plan was also in her head, in the series of steps she had worked out in the early months of arriving in this city. The route to the bus station, the early coach to the next city, the name she would use that she had not yet used anywhere. A third name, Ready. She did not take the plan out and examine it the way a panicking person does. She held it the way you hold a tool you have ready. It is there, you know it is there, you pick it up if you need it. She was not yet at the point where she needed it. She thought about what had happened in the station. She had seen boots, she had seen a scuff. She had walked away. He had not followed her out of the station. She had been outside for 2 full minutes before she entered the market, and she had checked both directions on the street before going in, and she had not seen anyone coming through the station exit behind her. He had not followed her out. This meant either that he had not seen her, or that he had seen her and had not recognized her, or that he had seen her and recognized her, and had chosen not to follow immediately. The third option was the one she wanted to spend the least time on because it produced a kind of cold that had nothing to do with the morning air. But she made herself look at it anyway because not looking at things was how the first version of herself had gotten into the situation she had spent 2 years escaping. If he had seen her and recognized her and chosen not to follow, this meant he knew where the station was, which meant he was in this part of the city, which meant she needed to think about what else he might know. She pressed her back against the library chair. She thought. He could not be in this city by accident. She could not make herself believe that. The world was large and the city was medium-sized, and the probability of coincidence had long since been overtaken by the probability of intent. He was here because someone had told him something that pointed in this direction. What that something was, she did not know. She had been so careful. She had been so careful. And he was in the station. She thought about the calls to Faye. Phone box, no direct route, never the same day in the same week. She thought about Jeffrey, the landlord. Cash, false name. No contract, no record. She thought about Dot. Cash wages. 3 months in before a bank account was opened. And that account was opened under Claire Whitmore, whose documentation she had arranged in the first city through a woman she had found, through a woman who knew someone. All of it painful and expensive and absolutely necessary. She thought about Carol. She thought about the man with the thermos. She thought about Gary at the gym. She had not told any of these people anything real. She could not trace it. She had been careful enough that she could not find the gap herself, which was both reassuring and maddening, because if she could not find it, she could not close it. She had been in this city for 5 months. She had been in the previous city for 7 months, and she had left it not because she was found, but because she felt something shift in the way that things sometimes shift when you are paying enough attention. A change in the quality of the air around her routine. A car that appeared twice in 3 days on a street that had no reason for it, and she had left before she could confirm anything. 7 months in the previous city. Had she left a trace there? Had someone in that city, in that job, spoken to someone who had spoken to someone? She did not know. She was sitting in a library with a book she had not read a single page of, and she did not know. She turned the book over in her hands. It was a novel. She noted the title without reading it. She put it flat on the table. She needed to think about what to do today, not about where the gap was. The gap was a problem for later. Today she needed to know, go home or do not go home. She stayed in the library until 11 o'clock. Then she walked to the bus stop and took a bus to the west of the city and got off at the supermarket and bought nothing, and walked from there toward Clover Street in the way she had planned, a wide approach, coming in from the opposite end of the road so she could see the street without appearing in it. She walked to the corner and stopped. She looked at Clover Street from the junction. Ordinary. Morning ordinary. The specific version of ordinary that belongs to weekdays in residential areas. A woman with a pushchair, a man with a shopping bag, 2 pigeons on the pavement near a bin that had something edible in it. The convenience store with its daytime stillness, not yet blinking because it was too bright out. The entrance to her building, set slightly back from the road, the door painted dark green the way it had been since she first arrived. She scanned the cars parked along the street. A white van she recognized. It had been there since before she moved in and did not belong to anyone she had seen, and she had concluded long ago that it was simply one of those permanently parked vehicles that accumulate in residential streets with the slow certainty of sediment. A red car she had seen several times, belonging, she thought, to the woman on the second floor whom she passed occasionally in the stairwell. A gray car she did not recognize. She looked at the gray car. It was parked 2 spaces from the entrance to her building. It was facing the building. The windows were not tinted, which meant she could see, from this distance, that there appeared to be nobody in it. She stood on the corner for 5 minutes. The gray car did not change. Nobody got in or out of it. Nobody walked past it in a way that involved slowing or looking at it. She crossed the street at the far end of the road and walked along the opposite pavement slowly, reading the cars as she went, checking the gray car as she passed it from across the road. Empty. A parking disc on the dashboard. She could not read it from this distance. She kept walking to the far end of the road and stopped at the phone box near the market. She picked up the receiver. She did not dial. She stood with the receiver against her ear and looked back down Clover Street and thought. She had been away from the flat since 8:49. It was now 20 past 11. If anyone had come to the flat in that time, they had come and gone without knowing anything because the flat contained nothing under her real name. The flat was Claire Whitmore's flat. Nina Gallagher did not live there. She put the receiver back. She walked to her building. She went in through the front door. She walked up the stairs without stopping to look at the landing below hers, because looking would have slowed her down and she needed to move normally, needed to sound normal on the stairs, needed to be a person who lived here coming home from somewhere ordinary. She unlocked the flat. She went in. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway. Everything was where she had left it. Coat on the hook, shoes on the mat, the slight smell of the morning's missed tea, the kettle she had turned on and then forgotten in the rush. The kitchen visible from where she stood, the plant on the windowsill, 4 leaves, all fine. She let herself breathe. She was inside. The door was closed. She tested the deadbolt. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. She went to the kitchen and put the kettle on properly, and stood with her palms flat on the counter while it boiled. She was late for work and she had not called Dot. She picked up her phone and called the dry cleaner. Dot answered on the second ring. "I'm so sorry," she said. "There was something I had to deal with, a personal matter. I should have called sooner." "Are you all right?" Dot said. The question landed differently than it usually did. She had heard it from Dot before, in the ordinary way of colleagues checking in, and she had always been able to answer it easily because until today, the answer had been a simple yes. Today, it was not a simple yes. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm really sorry about this morning." A brief pause on Dot's end. "Do you need the day?" "No, I'll be in by 12:30. "Right," Dot said. And then quietly, not unkindly, "Claire, If there's ever anything you need to talk about. She held the phone and felt something in her chest do a complicated thing. Thank you, she said, and meant it in a way she could not explain. She made tea. She drank it. She thought, for one long honest minute, about whether she was going to stay in this city. The thought tasted like the coffee she had drunk in the market. Necessary and slightly bitter and not entirely unpleasant given what the alternative was. Then she got changed, put on her coat, picked up her bag, and looked around the flat once before she left. The plant on the windowsill. The mug with the cheerful slogan. The photograph, face down in the corner of the wardrobe, which she could not see from here but knew was there. She thought, please. Not the king, not here, not this city, not this flat, not these careful ordinary things I have built. It was not a prayer exactly. She was not certain who she was saying it to, but she said it, very quietly, in the empty flat, before she went out. She tested the deadbolt from outside. 4 clicks. She walked toward the dry cleaner. She took the longer route. The man with the thermos was gone by this hour, his station abandoned until tomorrow morning, and this absence was the only thing on the entire route that felt wrong, that felt like a small gap in the fabric of the ordinary, and she noted it, and kept walking. She was going to work. She was going to think. She was going to make a decision tonight, alone, at the table by the window, with all the facts she had arranged in front of her like the tiles of something she had not yet learned to read. She was going to do what she always did. She was going to be careful. She was going to stay upright. And she was going to keep her eyes open, because her eyes had been open for 2 years and 5 months and they had not failed her yet, even when the rest of her was running on 4 hours of sleep and no breakfast and the particular cold that had come in overnight with an edge that got into your collar and stayed there. She kept walking. The street was ordinary. The city was ordinary. Everything was exactly as it always was. And she walked through the middle of all of it with the cool, watchful, quiet efficiency of a woman who knew exactly how fragile ordinary was, and exactly how much work it took to keep it. She took the wrong bus home that evening. Not because she had made an error. She knew exactly which buses ran on which routes and where they stopped. She took the wrong bus because wrong, in this instance, was more useful than right. The right bus, the one she took every day, left from the stop outside the pharmacy on the main street and deposited her 4 minutes walk from Clover Street, a walk she knew so well she could have done it without her eyes open. The wrong bus left from the stop outside the post office and went in a loop around the outer edge of the city center before doubling back past the train station on its way to a neighborhood she had never needed to visit. She had identified this route in the second month as useful for days when she needed to see if anyone was following her without appearing to look for followers. The loop was slow and specific and required 3 different people to get off the bus, follow her onto this bus, follow her around the loop, and get off at the same stop, which would be so obvious that it was almost a non-concern, and was mostly useful for giving her 30 minutes on a moving vehicle where she could think. She thought. She had worked her shift. She had arrived at 12:40, which Dot had accepted without comment, beyond a brief look over the reading glasses. Carol had been on the afternoon, and had not asked about the morning. She had written tickets and found clothes and processed payments and smiled at the right moments and nodded at things that required nodding at. And she had done all of this while the back of her mind worked on the same question it had been working on since 11 minutes past 9 in the station. Was it him? She kept returning to the scuff, the 2-centimeter white mark on the left heel of a black boot. She ran through the possibility that this scuff could exist on other boots, that this was a boot a cobbler might have scraped, that this was a common damage pattern, that her memory of the specific mark might be less specific than she thought it was. She ran through all of this carefully and came back to the same place. She knew that mark. She had made that mark. The angle of it was particular, the curve at its upper edge where the corner of the box had dug in slightly before skating off. She had looked at it for months on the shoe rack in the hallway of the other house. It was his. She was going to proceed on the assumption that it was his, and deal with the consequences of being wrong about that if it turned out she was wrong. Being wrong would cost her nothing. Being wrong in the other direction had already cost her more than she was willing to think about on a bus. If it was his, then he was in the city, in the station, at 9 in the morning on a weekday. The station was where you arrived if you came by train. It was where you left if you were going somewhere. It was also where you went if you wanted to watch people arrive and leave. She thought about this. She had spent years thinking about how he thought, using the knowledge the way a sailor uses knowledge of rocks, not because she was interested in the rocks, but because knowing where they were kept the boat from being destroyed. He was a person who sent people ahead of him. He had always been this way. He sent people to do the visible work, and he appeared later, when the information had been gathered, when the ground had been prepared. This was how he ran his business. This was how he ran his life. He sent people to Colin's shop. He sent people to Faye's house. And then, once the ground was prepared and a direction established, he came himself. The direction from Faye's house was north and east, approximately. She had not lived north and east. She had lived south and east, deliberately, because she had understood that if he ever got a direction, it would be approximate, and she could be wrong on the approximate by a significant margin. But this city was north and east of Branton. Not the only city north and east, but one of several, and a reasonably sized one that a person might choose. Had he come to every city north and east? She looked out the window of the bus as it rounded the outer loop. The city moved past her, its ordinary evening face, the shops closing, the lights beginning to matter as the sky went gray, people moving with the purposeful tiredness of the end of a workday. She thought about the number of cities. She thought about the resources required to send people to each of them, to pay for the looking, to maintain the search over months. The king had money. He had always had money. She was not going to comfort herself with the idea that this was beyond his means. But she was also going to be precise about what she knew versus what she feared. What she knew. A pair of boots with a specific scuff had been in the station this morning. What she feared. A whole architecture of surveillance and closing gaps and being days away from being found. The fear was not evidence. The bus came around the far end of the loop and headed back toward the station. She watched the station approach through the window. She watched the entrance. Ordinary people going in and out in the ordinary way of the end of a working day. She watched until the bus moved past it and she could no longer see the entrance. She did not see him. She got off at the stop 2 streets from Clover Street, not her usual stop, and walked from there. A different approach from this morning's, coming in from the east this time, through a side street she had walked once before. She checked the gray car. It was gone. She stood on the pavement for a moment after she noticed this. The space where the gray car had been was now a gap between an older saloon she recognized and the white van that was always there. Just a gap. She could not tell if the absence was reassuring or not. A car that is gone cannot be assessed. A car that is still there tells you something. A car that has moved tells you nothing, except that it moved. She went upstairs. She unlocked the flat. She went through the deadbolt 4 times. She ate something without tasting it, standing at the counter because she did not have the appetite for sitting at the table. For the ritual of being a person who lived here calmly and looked out the window and felt something like contentment. She washed the plate. She sat on the bed with her phone. She was not going to call Faye. It was not Thursday and Faye was not expecting contact, and she did not want to alarm Faye unless she had something specific to say, and right now she had a scuff on a boot and an empty parking space and a cold feeling in her chest that was not specific enough to build a sentence around. She looked at her phone. The text came in at 8:43. She had been sitting with the phone in her hand, not looking at it but holding it the way you hold things that might matter, and the notification arrived with the small sound she had set for messages, and she looked at the screen. The number was unknown, not a number she had in her contacts, not a number she recognized. The message was 3 words. I saw you. She read it. She read it again. She read it 5 more times, each time with the same result, 3 words meaning exactly what they meant, and there was no reading of them that changed what they meant. She looked at the number. Unknown. A mobile number, not a local area code she recognized. Could be anywhere in the country. Could be bought from any phone shop on any high street with cash and no paperwork. She knew how that worked. She screenshotted the message. She looked at the screenshot. She looked at the original message. She was cold in a way that was not about the temperature of the room. He had seen her. He had been in the station and he had seen her, and she had thought she had turned before he could register her, but she had been wrong about that. Because here were 3 words on her phone that told her she was wrong. He had seen her. He had her number. He had her number, which meant he had found something she had not been careful enough about. Some thread she had not cut cleanly enough. Some connection between Claire Whitmore's number and Nina Gallagher's face, and he had pulled on it. Or he had been bluffing. She put this thought on the table beside the other thoughts and looked at them together. It was possible this was a bluff. A message sent to a number acquired through some method she could not trace, sent to a woman who might or might not be in this city, hoping for a reaction. I saw you. And if you are Nina Gallagher, you will react, and the reaction will confirm what I suspected. She had not reacted. She had sat perfectly still on her bed holding her phone and reading 3 words and not done anything with them yet. She deleted the message. Then she looked at the blank space where it had been. She opened the screenshot she had taken. She stared at the screenshot. Then she deleted that too. Then she looked at the blank phone screen. She thought about whether deleting the message was the right decision. It was gone now either way. It did not matter. She put the phone down on the bed beside her. She looked at the wall. He had seen her. Or he thought he had seen her. Or someone had seen her and reported it and he had texted on the basis of a report. Or none of these things, and this was a guess, a calculated shot into the dark. She could not know which of these was true from where she was sitting. What she could know was this: someone now knew she was in this city. Someone with this number knew that this number belonged to someone worth texting the words "I saw you" to. Whether they knew it was her on the basis of actually seeing her, or on the basis of something else, something she had not accounted for, the result was the same. The city no longer felt the same. She did not know yet if that meant she had to leave it. She sat on the bed and thought for a very long time, and outside Clover Street moved through its evening in the ordinary way of streets that do not know what is happening in the rooms above them. The convenience store blinked its open sign. She watched it from where she was sitting, the orange pulse of it against the window glass, on and off, patient and indifferent and totally unaware. She thought about 3 words. She thought about the boots. She thought about the gray car that was gone. And she thought about the fact that she had been afraid for 2 years and 5 months, and that at no point in all of that time had the fear prevented her from thinking clearly, and she was not going to let it start now. She reached for the notebook on the bedside table, the one she had never written in. She picked up the pen beside it. She wrote 3 things, very small, in the middle of the first page. She looked at what she had written. Then she put the notebook back on the table, turned off the lamp, lay down in the dark, and waited for her mind to stop moving fast enough to let her think. It took a long time. But she had time. She was still here, and as long as she was still here, she had time. She did not go home that evening. She had meant to. She had walked away from the dry cleaner at closing time with the full intention of going home, of making tea and sitting with her notebook and thinking through the 3 things she had written in it, of arriving at a decision she could live with by the time Clover Street was dark and quiet. Instead, she kept walking past the junction that would have taken her home, and walked 3 more minutes to the chain cafe on the corner of the high street that stayed open until 10. She had been in this cafe twice before, both times briefly, once to use the bathroom and once to escape a sudden downpour while she was between buses. She knew it had a back corner table that faced the door and was not visible from the window. She knew it sold coffee and a limited range of food items, and that its lighting was the reliable dim of cafes that have been there for a long time and stopped pretending that brightness was inviting. She ordered a black coffee and a piece of something she did not inspect closely, and sat in the back corner table and looked at the door. She was going to think here, in a public place, with people around, because the flat felt too quiet tonight for the kind of thinking she needed to do, the kind that required some part of her to remain calm, and she was better at calm when there was the steady, low-level noise of other people around her. The irony of this was not lost on her. She who had always been private, who had built a life of deliberate invisibility, found it easier to think clearly in the middle of other people than alone in the flat that she had worked so hard to make safe. But the flat had a text message in it tonight. She had deleted the text message. She had deleted the screenshot. The text message no longer existed on her phone, but it continued to exist in the flat, in the air of the room, in the particular silence that had followed the sound of the notification arriving. She was not going to think in that silence. She drank the first coffee. She ordered a second. She spread the 3 things she had written in the notebook across the table of her mind and looked at them. The first thing: what do I know for certain? She had written this at the top of the page. Beneath it, in very small letters, the facts. A pair of boots with a specific mark. A text from an unknown number. 3 words. These were the facts. They were small, and they were not nothing, and they were not everything. The second thing: what does he know? She had written this halfway down the page. Beneath it, also in very small letters, the possibilities. He might know this city. He might know this phone number. He might know her face as it currently looked rather than as it looked 2 years ago. He might know something she had not found the gap for. He might know any of these things or all of them or none of them. What he did not know, she was increasingly certain, was her specific address. If he had her address, she would not have received a text message. She would have received a knock on the door. The text message was a probe. It was a stone dropped into a well to listen for the depth of it. I saw you. 3 words designed to produce a reaction, which would tell him something, or to produce no reaction, which would also tell him something, though less. She had produced no reaction. She did not know which thing that told him. The third thing, what are my options? She had written this at the bottom of the page, and under it she had written 2 columns. Not staying and leaving, exactly, but not yet and now. She thought about the second column first, because she was honest with herself about the pull of it. The now column had the familiar quality of a path she had walked twice before: pack the bag, take the coach, new name, new city, start again. The now column was a known quantity. It was survivable. She had survived it twice and she would survive it again. And the thing about starting over was that she had gotten very good at it. Good at finding the ordinary work and the decent landlord and the gym with the right treadmill and the coffee shop that might become a routine and the plant that might put out a leaf. She could do all of it again. She was capable of all of it. But she was sitting in a cafe on a Thursday evening and she was tired. She was tired in a way that was not about sleep, not about the ordinary physical tiredness of a long day. She was tired of starting over. She was tired of packing 2 bags and leaving in the morning and finding a new counter to stand behind and a new street to learn. She was tired of the green jumper always being at the front of the drawer because she had not been anywhere long enough to accumulate anything in front of it. She was tired, and the now column knew this about her and was using it. She thought about the not yet column. The not yet column said, "You are safe tonight. You do not know his specific location. He does not know yours." The text message was a probe, not a confirmation. You have a plan ready. The bag, the coach, the name. You can leave tomorrow, if tomorrow brings something concrete. But tonight you do not have to leave. Tonight you have a cafe and a coffee, and the 3 things you wrote in the notebook, and those 3 things have not yet told you to go. She sat with both columns. She sat with them for a long time. She ordered a 3rd coffee because the cafe was still open and she had nowhere else to be. The 3rd coffee arrived, and she wrapped both hands around the cup the way she always did, for the warmth rather than any particular need for it, and she thought about the question she had not put in either column. What was she afraid of exactly? Not the practical things. She had accounted for the practical things. She was afraid of something more specific than discovery, more specific than the logistics of being found. She was afraid of a particular moment she had rehearsed in her mind many times over the past 2 years, the moment of arriving somewhere and finding him already there, finding that the careful distance she had maintained had been closed without her knowledge, finding that she was not in fact as far ahead as she had believed. She had managed that fear for 2 years by being careful. She was still being careful. But she had let herself become comfortable. She had let herself begin to believe, in the small and ordinary way that you let yourself believe things when life is going reasonably well, that careful was the same as safe, that the routines were enough, that 5 months of nothing bad happening meant that nothing bad was about to happen. And then she had overslept, and taken the shortcut, and looked at her phone while she was moving through a crowded station, and somewhere in those 11 small minutes of not being careful, something had happened. She pressed her palms flat on the table. She was not going to blame herself for 11 minutes. She was not going to take the 2 years of good decisions and fold them up small and forget them because of 11 minutes. That was exactly the kind of thinking she had worked very hard to stop doing. The thinking that said every small error was the error that undid everything, that she was one imperfect morning away from catastrophe. She had been in that place, had lived in that place, and she was not going back to it. She had made an error. She had taken a shortcut on a day she should not have. She had seen something that might or might not be what she thought it was, and she had received a text that might or might not be a bluff. These were facts. They were facts she could work with. She thought about the anger. It arrived the way it always did, not as a building thing, not as something that came on gradually, but as a switch. One moment it was not there, and then it was, a clean and specific anger, directed, not diffuse. She had noted this about herself a long time ago and had stopped trying to understand it and simply used it. Anger worked differently in her than it worked in other people she had known. Other people used anger the way you use fire in the open air, to warm, to signal, sometimes to burn things. She used it the way you use fire in a small metal box, contained, directed, producing heat rather than destruction. She was angry at the boots in the station. She was angry at the 3 words on her phone. She was angry at 2 years and 5 months of being careful, of the shortened route and the phone box and the different name on every form, of the trainers by the door and the bag with 3 days' worth of clothes, and the plan she kept ready but had always hoped to never need. She was angry in the sweet specific way of someone who has been patient for a very long time and is now reaching the particular limit of patience that comes before a decision. Not the decision to go. The other one. The decision she had not made before. the one she had come closest to making twice and had pulled back from both times because the situation had always resolved before she got there. The decision that was not about distance or names or phone boxes or landlords who did not ask questions. The decision about what she was actually going to do. She sat with the anger and let it steady her the way it always did, the way familiar things steady you, the way the deadbolt steadied her at night, the specific reliable catch of metal doing what it was supposed to do. She was not done. She was not running yet. And she was not going to do what she had always done, which was to manage everything alone, in the quiet, in the dark, in the back corner of her own mind where nobody else could see it. She had been managing alone for 2 years and 5 months. She was tired of that too. She picked up her phone. She found a number she had saved under an ordinary name, a placeholder name, the name she used for the contact she had added in the second month in this city, after the Thursday call to Faye where Faye had given her the number and said, "Keep this, in case you ever need it." She had never used it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she pressed call. It rang twice. A man's voice answered, not young, steady. The voice of someone who picks up calls late in the evening without seeming surprised that the call has come late. "Nina," he said. Just her name. He had clearly saved the number. "I need to talk to someone," she said, not on the phone. A brief pause. "When?" "Tomorrow," she said. "Early." "All right," he said. "You know where." She did know where. Faye had told her, along with the number, an address she had memorized and never used, the way she memorized everything useful and never discarded it. "Thank you," she said. She hung up. She sat in the cafe for another 20 minutes and finished her coffee and watched the door. Nobody came in that she recognized. Nobody came in looking at the other people in the room. When the cafe announced it was closing, she thanked the server who came to collect her cups and left a coin on the table beyond what the bill required, because she still did things like this, still believed in small courtesies, still thought that the way you treated strangers said something real about what you were made of. She walked home by the longer route, past the cameras, up the stairs, through the door, the deadbolt 4 times. She looked at the flat, the plant, the mug, the photograph in the corner of the wardrobe face down against the wall. She felt, standing in her own hallway at 10:15 at night, something shift. Not fear, not the manageable fear she had been carrying. Something else. She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time. But this time, lying in the dark, she was not running through options or testing locks in her mind, or counting the days since she had left. She was thinking about tomorrow, and about the decision that was coming. The one that was not about distance or names, but about something harder. She was thinking about the fact that she had been afraid for long enough. And fear, like anything carried too long, eventually becomes something else. She was not sure yet what it had become, but she was going to find out. Tomorrow. She went back anyway. She had been out of the flat since early morning, and she had met the man whose number Faye had given her, a man named Leonard, who turned out to be in his late 50s with steady hands, and the kind of face that had seen a sufficient amount of the world to find it neither shocking nor reassuring, simply present. She had met him in a small building near the Civic Center, a building with no particular description from the outside, and they had sat in a room with a table and 2 chairs, and she had told him everything. Not everything she had ever thought or felt. The specific things. The boots, the text, the man at Colin's shop, the 2 men at Faye's house, the 5 months on Clover Street, Claire Whitmore, the cash payments, the phone box. He had asked precise questions in a quiet way that suggested he was used to sitting across from people who needed precision rather than comfort. At the end of it, he had said, "What do you want to happen?" She had thought about this answer for 2 years and 5 months. She had turned it over at night, and in the back of routines, and in the back of treadmills, and in every phone box near every market in every city she had lived in. What do you want to happen had always been the question she could not quite get to the bottom of, because the answer that came up first was, "I want to not be afraid." And that was not a want she knew how to make happen through any direct action. But she had sat in the chair in that small room, and she had thought about the previous evening, about the anger that had arrived like a switch, about the 3rd cup of coffee and the 2 columns in her notebook, and the tiredness that was not about sleep. She had said, "I want it to stop being only about survival." Leonard had nodded at this as if it were a perfectly formed and complete statement, which perhaps it was. He had given her instructions. Not simple instructions. The kind of instructions that required her to do things she had been afraid of doing. The kind she had argued herself away from twice before. The kind that involved speaking to people in official rooms with official paperwork and an official record that would exist after the fact. She had said, "I am not sure it will work." He had said, "I am not sure either. But not doing it has a track record you can assess for yourself." She had found this the most useful thing anyone had said to her in 2 years. She came home in the early afternoon. She walked the longer route, past the cameras, because she was not going to stop doing that, not yet. Not until she understood what the next stage looked like and how long it would take, and whether it was going to work. She passed the man with the thermos, who had returned for his afternoon shift, and he nodded, and she nodded back. The street was ordinary. The building was ordinary. She went up the stairs and she unlocked the door and she went inside. She turned the lights on. All of them. The kitchen light and the bedroom light and the small lamp in the hallway that she rarely turned on because she navigated the flat well enough in the dim without it. She turned them all on and stood in the lit flat and looked at it. It looked different when it was fully lit. It looked smaller and slightly shabby and also more real than it did in the half-light she usually kept it in. The carpet in the bedroom had its water stain in the corner that she had noted on the first day. The kitchen had a crack in the grouting above the back wall of the hob that she had looked at for 5 months without deciding it needed anything done about it. The bathroom had a towel rail that was slightly bent, which she had worked around for 5 months without straightening. She straightened the towel rail. She was not sure why. It took 4 seconds and a firm grip and the thing was done. The rail sat level. She looked at it for a moment, the small satisfaction of a thing corrected, and went back to the kitchen. She made tea. She looked at the plant. 5 leaves now. She had not counted carefully in the past week, and had missed the new one, which was very small and very green, and had uncurled on the side of the pot that caught the most light. 5 leaves. She looked at it for a long time. Then she went to the wardrobe. She had been going to the wardrobe for 5 months and taking out clothes and going back for the rest of her days, and the photograph had sat in the corner of that time at the bottom of the wardrobe, face down against the wall, patient and undisturbed. She knelt down. She picked it up. She was going to look at it. She had decided this without exactly deciding it. The way you decide things that have been waiting long enough that they arrive as inevitable rather than as choices. She turned it over. 3 people. Herself, on the left, in the green that had always been her color. She noted this about the photograph, the green jacket she was wearing, the specific shade of it, and felt the small dry accuracy of things that are true before you know they are true. Faye, in the middle, taller than her by 2 inches. Her face caught mid-laugh at something that had happened just to the left of the frame. Sam, 6 months old in Faye's arms, round-faced and very serious, looking directly at the camera with the profound assessment of someone who has recently arrived in the world and is still deciding what to make of it. She looked at the photograph for a long time. She had taken it out of the house because it was real. Because it was hers. Because even on the morning she had left, moving fast and quiet and efficiently through a life she was dismantling room by room and not looking back, she had gone back for this one thing and wrapped it in the gray t-shirt and put it in the second bag. And the reason for that was very clear to her now. She was still that person. She had always been that person. The woman in the green jacket laughing with her sister and looking at a baby with its serious assessing face. That person had not been erased by 2 years and 5 months of running. She had been with her the whole time. In the green jumper. In the Tuesday evenings and the chocolate digestives and the genuine interest in Carol's penguins. In the plant with its 5 leaves and the mug she had turned to face the right way. In the table by the window where she had sat and eaten like a person who lived somewhere, because she did live somewhere, and she did live there. She set the photograph face up on the table. She sat down across from it. She sat there for a while with her tea and the lit flat and the afternoon coming through the window and the city outside going about its work in its ordinary way, and she thought about what Leonard had said. Not doing it has a track record you can assess for yourself. He was right, she had assessed it. 5 months in this city, 7 months in the city before, 6 months in the city before that, all of them built carefully, and all of them lived in the particular low crouch of someone who is always ready to run. She had been very good at this. She was still very good at this. She was also done with it. Not recklessly done. Not in the way that leads people to make decisions that feel brave in the moment and catastrophic in the morning. Done in the way of someone who has held something for long enough to understand its full weight and has looked at it clearly and said, I know what this costs and I have been paying it, and now I am going to try something else. She had spoken to Leonard. Leonard knew people who knew how these things were done, the quiet official things, the paperwork that accumulated into something solid, the record that existed after the fact and could not be deleted. She was going to do the things Leonard had described, in the order he had described, starting tomorrow, And she was not going to do them alone because she had been alone with this for long enough. She was going to call Faye tonight, not from the phone box, from the flat, from her own phone, with the lights on, in the room where the photograph was face up on the table and the towel rail was straight. She was going to tell Faye what she had decided. Faye would say I'm sorry, and she was going to say don't be. And this time she was going to mean it in a different way, not the comforting way, the way that said your feelings about this do not need to be apologized for, the other way, the way that said, I am no longer sorry for what I asked you to hold, because what I am about to do means you will not have to hold it much longer. She pulled out her phone. She looked at it for a moment. The lights were all on. The photograph was face up. The plant had 5 leaves. The towel rail was straight. The mug had its slogan facing forward. The green jumper was at the front of the drawer. Good things take time. She had given this enough time. She pressed call. Faye answered on the first ring. Nina, Faye said. Not Claire, her name. Yes, she said. It's me. They talked for 47 minutes. The longest call they had had in 2 years. She told Faye everything. Leonard, the appointment she had made for the following morning, the things she was going to say in the room where she would say them, the paperwork that would be filed, the record that would begin to exist. Faye listened without interrupting, and when she had finished, there was a silence that was not empty but full. Are you afraid? Faye asked. Yes, she said, and then, and something else. Faye was quiet. I'm angry, she said, in the good way. Faye made a sound she recognized, the half-laugh that was also something more serious, the sound of someone who loves you well enough to feel relieved at the parts of you that are still sharp. She sat with the phone against her ear and looked at the photograph on the table, the 3 of them in it, the green jacket, Faye's mid-laugh face, Sam's serious baby assessment of the world. Is Sam still reading everything? She asked. He's on his 3rd book this week, Faye said. His teacher has given up trying to keep up with him. She smiled. The real kind. Tell him I said well done, she said. They talked for a little longer, the ordinary things, the boys, the weather, Colin, who was still angry and who would, Faye said, be glad to hear there was now something for that anger to be useful for. When she put the phone down, the flat was still lit, and still her own, and still quiet in the way of a place that is waiting for you, rather than in the way of a place that is simply empty. She looked at the photograph for a long moment. She thought about the woman in the green jacket and the mid-laugh sister and the very serious baby, and she thought about all the days between that photograph and this one, and she thought about the boots with the scuff and the text message and the 2 years and 5 months of phone boxes and cash payments and names that were not hers. She thought about what came next. Then she got up and went to the door. She tested the deadbolt. Not 4 times. 3. She caught herself before the 4th and held her hand on the bolt and thought about it for a moment. Then she let go. 3 was enough. 3 had always been enough. She had been doing 4 because she had needed something to tell her body that it was safe, and her body had required 4 counts to believe it, and that had been right, for a long time. That had been exactly right. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and the city murmured outside. Traffic and someone's television and the convenience store blinking its open sign in the way it always did. Patient and unchanged, the same pulse she had watched from this window for 5 months. She was going to stay, not because she was certain it was safe, not because the boots and the text had been resolved, or the situation had changed in any dramatic way. She was going to stay because she had made a decision to do something different, something that was not running, something she had been building toward without knowing it for 2 years and 5 months of careful ordinary life, and leaving now would mean abandoning that decision before she could act on it. She was going to stay, and tomorrow she was going to do the things Leonard had described, and then she was going to come home and cook something on the stove that took time, and eat at the table by the window, and look out at Clover Street, and watch the convenience store blink. She was going to stay. For the first time in 2 years and 5 months, this was a decision she was making not because she could not go, but because she did not want to. She closed her eyes. Outside, the murmur of the city going on without her, which she had always found steady, which she still found steady now. She was not going anywhere. She let that be the last thing she thought before sleep came, which it did, earlier than usual, as if her body had been waiting for permission. She slept without dreaming. In the morning she got up and looked at the photograph on the table. She picked it up. She held it for a moment. She had been afraid of being found. She was done being afraid of herself. She put the photograph back on the table, face up, where she could see it. Then she got dressed. put on the green jumper, and went out to do the next thing.